mistake that most coaches make, and we'll really go into this on bars, is a lack of physical preparation with our athletes. We're not setting them up for success. In other words, we're not giving them the tools that they're going to need to be able to apply in regard to skills where they'll succeed in our sport. Okay, so a lot of this is going to be conditioning, strengthening, things to look out for, a lot of troubleshooting in regard to running, hurdling, punching, blocking, flying through the air, all those things. But bigger than anything, it's really trying to see how you can use this with a half hour on golf. Who gets half hour? Pretty much, that's pretty standard with this level. It's how to utilize that half hour to maximize what you're getting out of your athletes. And I think I have some pretty good tips on what's worked for us over the years. Currently, I actually coach our level 5s on ball. I like to do it pretty much every year when we have a good group because it kind of bridges the gap between compulsories and optionals. And I like to get my hands on that as much as I possibly can. It's something that I love level 5. I think that it's a great level. I think it's becoming less and less popular with the emergence of Excel because it's hard. Okay, and it's the flat out truth, right? Is it's difficult. A lot of us gravitate towards something that might be a little bit easier, especially with the modern child and the modern parent. Sometimes easier is just better. Okay, but a lot of times we have kids with long-term aspirations. They want to do collegiate gymnastics. Level 5 to me is one of the greatest things that you can provide for them. Okay, but that's a whole different little deal. We'll worry about that another time. Let's go ahead and get going. We're going to start with preparation for legs, and this is kind of up and down the leg, front, back, and just things that, again, I always say is we don't spend a lot of time on this stuff just by itself. It's more of either during our complex work or our return stations. And I might as well just get this out of the way. Return stations for us is everything. Okay, let's say we have 8 kids in line. I don't want 7 people standing in line talking about what they're doing tonight. Okay, I want the kids focused and engaged on the task at hand. So what we try to do is give them event-related, skill-related conditioning or exercises or drills on the way back so that they, when it's their turn, are really dialed in. Okay? The way that we do that, and our vaults are against the wall. A lot of people put their vaults against the wall. We have a vault runway vault that goes into an elevated resi that's elevated 4 inches, and then we throw the hard landing net on for our handspring kids if we're not doing stack ball. What I try to do, and I'll try to explain it very specifically so you can incorporate it because it's made the world of difference for us in our half-hour ball world. Okay, because I like to try to get 12, 15 vaults in, plus have time for run warm-up, and then also have time to do what's next. Meaning if they're level 4s or 5s, we're starting to work on half-ons, we're starting to work on your Chango drills, things of that nature so that we're ahead of the game. Okay, the only way I've found to do that surely isn't 8 kids standing in line and waiting for the gymnast to do their vault, and then you coach that gymnast for 30 seconds, then you say, come on, Betty, it's your turn. Okay, you're not going to get much done doing that. Okay, I like to try to stand back on vault as much as I can so I can see it, because I think it's critical to be able to see the end of the run where the hurdle is taking place and the alignment on the board, and then the blocking go off the table. And I can't see that from 3 feet away. I feel like I need to back up. It also allows me to kind of get the big picture on what they're doing on the way back. In a perfect world, if I've got 8 kids, let's say, I've got, let's say, someone that just vaulted, their job is now to stand next to the vault board. We have the person that was on deck that is now going to be the vaulter. She will then become the board setter. They'll have 4 or 5 stations on the way back. Then we'll have one gymnast, let's say, on the double deck, one's on deck, and we have the vaulter. Okay, so if you're thinking about going in a circle, it's like rapid fire. So you'll hear the board. The gymnast that had just vaulted is now setting it. It takes maybe 1.5, 2 seconds. Usually that means just straightening it, because all of our kids typically vault around 2 feet from front handsprings. And within a second of that, 1.5 seconds of that ball board being hit, the next gymnast is running down the road. So a vault takes place about every 4 to 5 seconds. Okay, because a lot of kids can't set their own board. Yes, they can. Okay, you can work with them to get them to do it. Level 1, probably not. Bronze is the little kids with wiggly teeth, probably not. Okay, but as they get older and they can start taking a little more ownership of what they're doing, our level 3s and beyond all set their own vaults. Okay, it gets them into it. All right. So if you imagine that, then they go from the board setter to station number 1. Let's say that's some type of a handstand drill, because I consider a handspring a flying handstand. If your kids have good handstands, they will do good handsprings. If your kids have bad handstands, they will do bad handsprings. And people are like, right? And it has nothing to do with handspring on the floor. It's not archy, right? It's not a lot of heel drive over the top. We want to drive the heels, but we surely don't want to drive them over into an arch position where we're going to, get over with our hands too quickly. Okay? But if you can picture that kind of deal, then it's a drill, then another drill, double deck, and then they're up. And about every 4 seconds, they're going to board up. I don't coach my kids after every single vault, except for maybe a very basic correction, head alignment, something like that. I'd rather watch them do 3 or 4 vaults and then kind of call them in, and I like to call it pattern coaching, where I don't coach every single time, because a lot of times you're saying the same thing over and over again. Right? I prefer to watch 5 or 6, kind of have the athlete create a pattern, and then I can kind of see what I'm working with there, rather than overreacting to one turn or underreacting to one turn, whatever it may be. Okay? And that's something that I think comes with experience. If you're a young coach and you're just starting out, I want to check with the boss or the head coach if you can do that kind of thing. I think a lot of that comes with maturity and the trust level of you and your athletes, but it is something that's really helped over the years. Because I feel like I'm always doing the talking, they're not thinking very much. I don't make corrections every single time, and I ask them, and after our 5th term, we're going to have a little chat. I want you to think about what you feel like you're doing wrong and correctly. Let them become kind of a mini coach. Let them watch each other. A lot of times we have a 3rd spot where the gymnasts will stand and they'll watch the ball. They'll watch the alignment on the board. We have lines on the walls, board alignment, blocking the lines. They watch that and they try to get a better understanding of what it is that they're trying to do. I think that anytime your kids are a little bit smarter, a little more in tune, become a little bit of a mini coach, they're going to be a much better gymnast. Okay, them understanding, not just you always barking corrections at them and them going like this while they're not even thinking about what you're saying, right? We much would rather have them focused on what they're doing, and again, I do that through what I call pattern coaching. Okay, but let's go ahead and let everyone kind of get the idea of the rotation. You can almost visualize it working. It's unbelievable, and it really does allow us to get 8 kids. We can get 15 vaults done with 8 kids in 10, 11, or 12 minutes. Okay, so and maybe brief little coaching athlete sessions in between, but keeping that very simple. All right, so let's just go through the leg strength quick. Is calf development, and everything will get, like I said, very beginner, a little more intermediate, and then a little bit more advanced. So again, thinking what we can use in our classes, and I think that anytime you can incorporate very rudimentary conditioning exercises in your classes, and I'll talk about this more tomorrow morning, about demystifying conditioning and not making it sound like it's a punishment, but that it's actually a reward, that you'll get much better athletes. Okay, but very basic, just obvious calf raises. I think that, I know I did it as a young coach, I did not spend enough time on the lower legs, front and back side. Backside needs to be strong because it helps us with taking off, it helps us with accelerating, helps us with punching. Front side, if we have an imbalance between our calves and the muscles that are by your shin bone, that's when the athletes get shin splints. Okay, so making sure that they do, if you call these calf raises, we call the front of the leg toe-ups, where you simply just pull the front of the leg, front of the foot off the ground, until it really, really burns. And then we do that with different feet positions to try to build that muscle. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. You flex your foot, touch the muscle right next to your shin bone. A lot of times with our younger girls, that's extremely underdeveloped, and that's when you get shin splints. an imbalance. The calf is strong, that muscle is weak, big problems. Okay, we've had a lot of luck since implementing those exercises to virtually none of our athletes have their shins taped or have those compression socks. We've had a lot of luck, and I think it's because the conditioning is balanced. Okay, then a little more advanced, there's a little bit of resistance. We'll talk more about it tomorrow, but I love partner conditioning. I love it when they work together. I think they get a little better understanding. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because there's probably 150 slides. The other thing I always preface this by saying, these are kids that are doing this level. My least favorite thing on earth is when a clinician comes up and is showing you their level 5s or their level 10s doing a level 5 ball lecture. Of course they look good. This is a good group of kids. We're doing this level at the time. A lot of these guys, this was taped, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, our 8s and 9s are ready to go to level 10 right now. Good group, but they were this level. This is not advanced kids showing you the basics of gymnastics. And then the most advanced, and a lot of times you'll see them having fun with this kind of stuff. And I'm a big fan of that. It's just trying to make them kind of enjoy their conditioning. And this is just a piggyback kind of releve walk in a really good way for really whole body strength. Great for balance, but really good for lower level strength. Okay, hamstring development, another one we probably don't spend enough time doing. This is simply just kind of a hamstring lean, where they're trying to keep their hips flat, which means that their core or abs and their glutes are engaged, and that is critical in creating a straight line handstand for kids. So this is kind of just a very basic exercise to teach the front and back side body tension that is extremely important. Why is it so important? Because if we don't have good balance in the front and the back of the body, if we're not squeezing our glutes, what happens onto the table? A pike, right? If we're not squeezing our abs, what usually happens off the table? An arch. So you go pike, you go arch, what follows that arch? 7-2. Okay? So what we're trying to do is create that nice straight line, nice handstand, good balance, good flat hips, so that the kids can maintain that straight line throughout. A little more advanced, these are hamstring push-ups. Really not pushing off your hands very much. The kids that really get good at this can actually lean and almost just like touch their fingers on the floor and pull back up. Once you're starting to get this ability to kind of use those hamstrings and glutes, again, they'll be able to drive their heels a lot better, number one, but number two, stay straight. Okay, just general leg strength lunge walks. Always trying to get the athlete to step their foot out further than their kneecap, and that's going to help not injure their knees. Okay, if the knee goes further than the foot, a lot of time that puts a little bit of undue stress on the knee itself, the patella and the patella tendon, and they can get a little sore from that. So really making the lunge step as big as they possibly can. Okay, everything's forward and backwards, and that kind of goes with everything we do for our run complex stuff. Everything's both directions. And again, I like to say with this stuff, and I'll say it again in bars, I'm sure, it's not necessarily what they're doing, but it's how they're doing it. Okay, and that's one of the things that if you look at gyms that are successful year after year after year, there's no secret to what they're doing. It's all the same stuff, guys, but it's the way that they're doing it, the way that these athletes are doing it, the discipline, okay, the attention to detail, the thought process that it matters, that every turn matters, every rep matters. And if that happens and you can create that kind of culture, that idea, your athletes will skyrocket through the levels. Okay, because they understand it is a sport that is based on discipline and details, fundamentals, basics, all of those things. When that stuff is done correctly, gymnastics is pretty easy. And then with a little bit of resistance, these are simply, we call them weight sticks. They're PVC pipes that have either sand or gravel inside of them. They weigh between 10 and 15 pounds. We also have some shorter ones for the little guys. We basically store these in those basketball holders that you buy at a Lowe's store. They stick them in the little holder. They're up against the wall, so they're out of the way, and we use them for all kinds of stuff. A really nice, safe, inexpensive way to have resistance without using a lot of metal dumbbells and things of that nature that can get a little bit more, number one, expensive and a lot more dangerous. Okay, inner thigh, hip flexor strength. It's called these walk like an Egyptian. And just kind of taking a big step and making sure that, again, we're creating a balance between all the leg parts. A lot of times we talk about the calves versus the shins. It happens a lot with the hamstring versus the quad. Okay, if that imbalance occurs, that's when you're going to have problems. Okay? Hip flexors, and these can be done straddled or pike. We like the gymnast to reach past their knees with their fingers, creating that slight lean forward, and those burn. Okay, if you're not doing those, when you try it with your kids for the first time, you'll hear it, because they're actually a lot harder than they look. I will preface this by saying we start everything super slow, and then as they get more advanced, we add the ballistic factor of the speed, the power, those types of things. Everything's slow first. Okay, glutes, hamstrings. Again, if you look at the back of the screen, that could be something you can see yourself incorporating with your class athletes. And then as they get a little bit better at it, just working the back side of the body. And for heel drive, a lot of times when kids have trouble with heel drive, it's because the front of their body is super strong, because we do lots of hollow rockers and leg lifts and all those things, but we don't spend enough time strengthening the back side of the body, once again creating that imbalance. And a lot of times when we have issues with our gymnastics, with certain skills, particularly handstands, it's an imbalance. And then resisted running. That girl in the back's being really mean. Not usually quite that sadistic. They work together a little bit better. Okay, and then very basic plyometrics, we call these down and outs. And it's just beginning the philosophy of what punching means. Okay, punching versus jumping. All right, what is punching? Brave enough to raise their hand and tell me what a punch is. Go ahead.
Like straight legs, propulsion, like using the spring.
Straight legs, but without having straight legs. Right? We don't want our legs locked, because that'll create injuries every time. But in a punch, it's a very rapid, very quick, through the feet, rather than through the legs, through the feet and the ankles, the calves, with a very minor deflection. Okay, if you watch kids that are really good at punching, these aren't blocked per se, but they're able to catch it to where the knee bends just very briefly and then explodes through a straighter line to create that energy. Okay, you don't want them to teach straight leg punches, because eventually we're going to be doing combinations on floor exercise and things like that. We surely don't want them going front layout, straight-legged punch into something else. Okay, you will have a bunch of hurt kids. So just these basic plyometric exercises are good for starting to introduce that. Their legs are bending a lot more than what a punch is, but they're starting to get the idea of what that means. Okay, shaping preparation. And this is just very basic stuff. Classes. Okay, have your kids just do that for 15, 20 seconds during warm-ups. Okay, we're always telling our kids, tighten up. Straighten up, tighten up. They don't know what you mean. Okay, you have to, don't tell them, show them. And you show them by getting into those positions and then checking the body tension. So just giving them little ideas of how do we find this muscle group, and then how do we apply it into straightening our line or doing what we want our body to do to create the shapes that create our skills. Okay? And we do this in standing, laying down, boxes, panel mats, just as much as we possibly can, until we really believe they understand what it means to be tight. Okay, and that's something that I think in classes we don't do a good enough job of. And you can use your own imagination. This is not rocket science. This is just a way to illustrate to the kids. This is what being tight means. Can you feel that? Yes. So if you don't feel it, what do you think is happening? Loose, right? Tight feels like something. You have to teach them what that feels like. Piped versus straight feels like something. Teach that to them so they know the difference. And then once they can do that, they have better command over their body positions. Your athletes will get better. A little more coach intensive. Our upper level kids will do this with each other. They love it. think it's hilarious. But if you check a kid that really pikes all the time or really struggles with keeping that straight line, when you check that, a lot of times they don't understand what it means to engage the glutes, engage the hamstrings. You pick them up and the butt drops. Okay, if that happens, they don't understand or aren't strong enough to be straight, tight, whatever you want to call it. Okay? And then we just do it the same way, just a little higher box, just really working on stretching. Going to the side, stretching the body from fingers to toes. Are you as long as you can possibly be, making sure they feel that length. Okay? Handstands, as I mentioned, a handspring is a flying handstand. The better your handstands are, the better your handsprings are going to be. Handstands in general, I don't love the wall. Okay? I'd rather use a little different technique in working on handstands. But if you are going to use the wall, and it's pretty good for getting head positions established, getting shoulder angles open, really making sure that their glutes are engaged, their core is engaged, they're super straight, and you can do it for a longer period of time. You can hold a handstand for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute, and they're able to stay tight. That really creates that muscle memory, that drive into the brain that this is what I'm supposed to feel like. Okay? And I think that when your belly against the wall is superior to back against the wall, it creates just a better shoulder angle, a little more extension through the shoulders, really making sure the arms are all the way open, that neutral head position, and a great straight line. I prefer in the handstands, and we call these support handstands, and this is a very beginning version, but is using it can even be higher than this for kids that are smaller, but is where the body or a body part is supported against an object where the feet are free. Okay, when the feet are free, and again, this is a very basic version, but you see her having to fight to keep that handstand there. How much fighting is she having to do against the wall? Not very much. Okay, so they're really not learning how to hold a handstand, how to fight for a handstand. So again, very basic version, and as they get a little bit better at it, you'll see the fight a little bit more exaggerated. And this is a little bit lower, let's say 10 inches lower. When she does this, much more difficult for her to hold it. They're doing a very good job of just kind of putting those arms against those panel mats, isolating that lower body so it doesn't wave, and then being able to fight and learn how to do it. My favorite version is the springboard. And there she kind of lost it, but figured out what it took to get it back. A lot of times the board is there to help them. This is something you can spot in the beginning. The kids spot each other. Has anyone not seen this? Never seen these? You're welcome. This is unbelievable stuff in regards to teaching handstands. And then if you don't have the ability to spot, let's say it's just you involved and you've got a bunch of kids, is use the wall as the spotter. So it's the same exact principle, except we put the board about maybe 6, 7 inches away from the wall so their hands can fit. You see there's very little space in front of her fingers, maybe an inch or two. And then when she kind of messes up going that way, the wall just kind of helps her pull herself back in. And of course, to go the other way is very safe, and it's a great way to do it. And the way we work these is like, you see the wall, that's kind of our on the way back or return station area. Once your kids have established it and have a good memory to what you're supposed to do on the way back, I just kind of tell them, these are the 4 or 5 stations you need to do. Another great way to do it is I have a piece of cardstock. I'll have beginner, intermediate, and advanced versions of what a station would be. I laminate them, and then we'll just like thumbtack them to the wall. So there'll be 5 stations. If they're level 3s, they do the beginner. If they're level 4s, they do the intermediates. If they're 5s, they do the advanced. So all they have to do is they're rotating through our little vault circuit, is look up, figure out what they're doing, and then go from there. Okay? But that's a great one. Run complex ideas, and again, we're going to go quick here. I don't think there's anything here really that's going to blow your mind. Again, just the discipline in which they're doing it. I will say that everything we're doing here, the goal is to teach them how to run like an athlete and to understand what it means to accelerate. To go from slower to faster, not what most of our kids want to do, which is go from faster to slower. Okay, we want a great vaulter, we have to go from slower to faster. And by the time we get to our hurdle step, hopefully we're at the peak of our run, we're running as fast as we can or as safe, and we vault from that perspective. Okay, but everything is starting standing, and we add slow motion, and then as they get more comfortable, we add speed. And everything goes from a stand to a walk, to a jog, to a sprint, so that they really understand the feeling of acceleration. Again, it's something we think is obvious. We think running like an athlete is obvious. I know in our part of the country, a lot of schools are cutting PE. They don't have time for it. They think, it is what it is, but we're losing some of that in our schools. Both mom and dad work. And we get kids into our gymnastics classes, you'll be lying if you won't admit it, that run like they have something wrong with them. Right? And that's something that as gymnastics instructors, as teachers, because that's really what we are, is we can help them create a lifelong quality that will help them in anything and everything that they do within their whole lives, right? Whether they stay a gymnast or they move on to do something else, teaching your kids how to run like an athlete is a gift that you will bestow on them, that it is very, very important. Okay? And we've had it happen where parents will be like, I guess that was vault today. On vault today, all they did was work on drills for running and punching and some handstands, and they didn't really vault. I was like, we don't vault with our class kids. What does vault in class look like? Run, slow down, hurdle either on the board or too close to it. Don't punch, but stomp on the board, and then coach lifts little Susie up onto the object. Tell me what we are accomplishing by doing that, please. 0. Okay? I would much rather spend our time with our class kids working on run development, working on punching, blocking, and might as well, since we're here, I think of punching to jumping as blocking is to pushing. Does that make sense? Okay? So blocking is a punch off of your hands, except we really will not have any elbow flexion. So there's that tiny bit of a difference, but for the athletes, where they really connect the dots and they understand what you're talking about, is when they don't understand what a block is and you try to get them to understand it's punching off your hands. That'll really be helpful. Okay, and then I'm just going to go through these. Just starting the jog, and everything with the run complex idea is always exaggerated. Okay, because running to me is not robotic. Our kids do not all run the same. They don't look exactly alike when they run. I think a lot of it is personal. Some kids use styles with a more exaggerated arm swing. We call that running arms. A lot of kids are good at an exaggerated version of that. For a lot of kids, it throws off what they're doing. Watch Simone Biles run. How does she run? Yeah, like a penguin. And then she does the shake through the hand. She's pretty good. But my point of that is I think too many people get so hung up on what the run looks like instead of what the run accomplishes. Okay, things we talk about with running is looking like an athlete. Okay, athletes don't run like this. They may run like this, where they're into the body, but nobody flails their arms if they're trying to run quickly. You'll never see that happen in a track meet. All right. The second thing is being light on our feet, making sure that our kids are not stomping their feet when they run, and it's chronic. They're heavy on their feet. We want them on the balls of their feet being as light as they possibly can. I talk about it a lot. I don't want to hear your run. If I hear you running, you are stomping your feet. And every time you stomp your feet, that's energy transferring into the floor, and you're losing power. Okay? Also, if you hear the steps only at the end, that's that stutter step stuff. That means they're slowing down. Not that I wouldn't if I was running towards a big, giant round tongue. I might slow down too, but it's something that will obviously hurt your vault and will not let them become. Okay? And then just some exaggerated stuff with high knees. Some kids that don't want to lift their knees, don't want to lift their heels. Okay? And even on this, I want them as light on their feet as they possibly can be. So really trying to listen and be in tune with it. They're very light on their feet. Okay? And then isolate the arms if we're truly trying to just focus on what the legs are doing, because a lot of times it gets confusing, throws off their rhythm, and makes things worse rather than better. Okay? And then this is kind of that acceleration, so walk, jog, sprint. And we use this with our little guys every day in their workouts. Okay, so it's stand, march, walk, jog, sprint. And when they start to feel that and they can understand it, that's going to help. And a lot of our kids actually start to vault that way in a much toned down version, but they'll take like one step as they walk. And then their first couple of steps will be a little bit slower. And then as they get closer to the vault table, their gait speed increases. And then by the end, hopefully it's very stretched out and they're running as fast or as close to as fast as they can. One-legged, oh, this is just exaggerated skipping. Again, not what she's doing, how she's doing it, very good, especially being light on the feet. It really, really helps with getting them to feel that, feeling them push through the ankles and the calves. This is the one-legged running. Want to get a good laugh? Do that with your class kids. Just don't say I said to. All right? Good stuff. Really good for strength. And then again, just the resisted running. Box pushes. Ask your boss first if you don't own the gym, because they do tend to wear out the boxes very, very quickly. So not ideal for that, but really good for teaching acceleration and for power. Okay, hurdle and board position. First thing we try to do is establish the punching again, trying to really feel like we're getting that tiny flex in the knees. These kids are doing a really good job of showing us they're not lock-legged, and they feel it when they do one where they bend their legs a little bit too much. If this is a little bit difficult with the arms up, almost anything in gymnastics, arms up is the most difficult variation. If you lower the arms, it makes it easier. So when you're teaching kids how to punch, start with the arms down. It's a lot easier to maintain that core position, or the ribs in, abs in, so that they don't throw their belly out when they punch, which is an obvious problem on vault for all of us. That'll be really helpful. As far as board positioning is concerned, all right, and oops. Okay. As far as board conditioning, posturing is concerned, we're again with the wall in our gym. We've got the ability to have tape on the wall. What the red line is signifying is that I want to be able to see that red line in front of her body, or her body to be right on top of that red line when she punches the board. If the body is in front of the red line, that creates what we all deal with all the time, which is the leaning in and the piking. Okay, and we talked about what follows the pike on, the arch off, followed by a really bad score. Okay, so what we've figured out over time is that the way that you fight that is by, we use an arm circle for the most part. We like our kids' hands to be down and back on the board. And we always talk about staying back on the board, meaning I want to be able to see the red line. Now, as your kids get older, more advanced, we've had a bunch of kids win level 9 Easterns over the years with handspring fronts, so we know how to develop the vault. A lot of those kids, because they're faster and they're physically able to handle the speed from the board to the table, a lot of them will hit the board or forward posture with their hands up. But I've never had any luck ever with compulsory kids trying to teach this type of hurdle. They get in too fast. Okay, also that forward body lean, I feel like a lot of times creates issue with board contact itself. Meaning that if they're leaning forward in their hurdle, a lot of times they'll altogether jump over the board. Okay, or they'll hit their heels on the front of the board and they end up between the horse or the table nowadays and the board itself and the table. Bad, right? That's not what we want to see. I feel like we try to teach them to be very visual in their run. People say, what does that mean? I teach our kids to look at the vault board. Okay, when they're running as fast as they can, hopefully, I want them looking at the vault board. When do they look up? When they take off the hurdle. Okay, so ideally what I want to see, and I'll try to be loud enough, is we're running, looking at the board, my eyes, when it's out that far, my eyes are out far. As I'm getting closer, my eyes are lowering. I know I'm at my hurdle line now. I do my hurdle, and I do my arm circle, and as I'm doing that, now my eyes go up to meet the table. To me, any sooner, or if you have kids that don't look at the board, ever, we've all had them, those are the ones where you become very religious at the meet. Right? Because they don't know where they are. Now you've added adrenaline, okay? Usually, at least in our world, the kids have to pretty much every meet back out a little bit because they're running faster, right? The adrenaline is there, there's the awards room, all the good stuff. So they tend to run a little faster. So we're always on guard to make sure that they back up. And we always watch to make sure that they're looking at the board because the environment is a little bit different. And almost every time when you have kids that say, I can't find my steps, I can't find my run today, almost always it's because they're not looking at the board or they're doing something a little bit different than they do when they're training in the gym on a daily basis. Okay? So that's just things to guard for. People ask me, how many steps do your kids take? I do not get involved in all of that. Okay? I hopefully they know how many steps they're supposed to take, but I do not go to a meet with a notebook that has all their names written down and which foot they start with and how many steps they take. Okay? Some people do, and if that's what works for you, great. I don't really feel like it's that necessary. People ask us about hurdle lines. To me, it's give or take. If there's one there, and the kids like it, we use it. But I don't want the kids falling in love with the hurdle line either. I don't want them relying on that. I want them relying on their remembrance of which foot I start with and how many steps do I take. Because then a lot of times if it's really bad, where let's say twice in a row, then I'll get involved with that. I'll make sure they're starting with their right foot. You start with your right foot. Yes, I start with my right foot. You sure you start with your right foot? Yes. How many steps do you take? 12. Okay. And then you determine whether or not that's actually what's happening. And you can fight a lot of battles and save a lot of days that way. But what we're trying to do with this drill here, again, is showing that board alignment. And then we just do little different drills where I want to see the red line. I want the kids to feel like the feet are going in front, that the weight is staying slightly back. This version, of course, because they're not running, they're ending up on the red line. And also, guys, the red line coincides with the line on the board. Okay, so around 2 feet is where that red line would be for handspring vaulting. Okay? Working on the arm circle, getting our hands down and back. You'll also notice that a lot of these kids do the arm circle differently. Some like the big one, some like the medium one, some like the small one. Some even just kind of figured out a way to drop their hands back as they're doing their hurdle. I don't care as long as they're back on the board and their hands are behind them when they make contact. And you'll see 1,000 different versions of that as we go through. Okay, then the punching with the feet in front and jumping backwards. Actually, really to exaggerate, I want the feet first, and then I want the body back. So arm circle, hands low, and then punch backwards. Yes, we've had kids say, well, I'm scared because that's going to happen when I do my vault. It's not going to happen when you run from 65 feet as fast as you can, I promise. I'll spot you if you need me. But it's a way to get them to understand the posture, feet lead, feet in front. Okay? And then just a great alignment drill. A lot of times everybody uses their vault table. Kids jump up or your level 3 vault stack. I love doing this in between our runways a lot, especially low-level kids, just to really work on that board alignment and being able to kind of get straight up off that board. And then, of course, using the table. Are we behind the red line? Excellent. Okay? Are we behind the red line? Probably on the red line. But you can see that none of these kids are leaning forward. If they lean forward on this drill, what happens? You are catching them. Right? That's the one where their forehead hits your hand instead of their belly hits your hand. Okay? Excellent drill for board alignment. And then just little different variations of ideas that you can do. Especially if you have a lot of boxes, a lot of boards, and there's some space in between your runways. Skill-specific drills, event-specific drills. Okay? and then just working on full speed onto a raised surface similar to a board, where they're working on the timing of their arm circle and getting their feet in front. Really good for that, and also really good for getting timing of the arms, and then also as a coach you can kind of really see how fast your kids are, because they will tear butt going into this. And then what happens, you put the ball board there and the ball table, and all of a sudden now they're doing their little trot again. Okay? Tyler, the last girl, likes to have a bigger circle with her arms. Whatever. As long as she's ending up on the board in the proper place, I'm good with it. And then just a different angle. Just running, she's a little younger, less developed, but just really working on running. Her hands might be a little quick even, almost to the front too soon, but pretty good job keeping posture. And then we talked a little earlier about losing the belly when they punch. That's something you want to guard against also. Really keeping the core engaged when they're making contact. Okay, punching. So we call this kind of blocking on our feet. And a great way is tumble track, ball boards, always starting with the arms low, getting them to feel it before we lift the arms up. A lot of times what you'll see is arms down, they're able to keep the straight line, keep the hips flat, the arms go up, the belly goes out. That is surely what is going to happen on the handspring if it happens on the drills. Okay, just a really good job for us as coaches to see too, punching. Sometimes just bending them a little too much. Okay, so we would say, that's a little soft through your leg. That's when you kind of like buckle on the board if you're running full speed. We've all had kids do that. You don't want them locked per se, but you also don't want them bent enough where they might buckle. And then just getting involved. Again, sometimes we have time for that, sometimes we don't, but it's just another really good drill, especially as they start to get a little bit stronger. And it's a wonderful stress reliever for the coaches. All right, pre-flight. Pre-flight, what is it? It's kind of the idea of kind of turning over, okay, starting to turn over. The one negative thing, we'll go through the positive things first. I'm an optimist. The positive things about doing compulsory handsprings is number one, we're hopefully gaining a good run, a good hurdle, some good ideas. The bad part is the pre-flight for a compulsory vault only turns over to a certain degree when ultimately we want vault to be a hyper rotational event, and compulsories we almost have to gear that back a little bit, which I would think would be really the only negative. We ultimately we want them to rotate, but there has to be stepping stones along the way. And people say, well, why would we do that then? Why don't we just teach them rotational handsprings from the beginning? Because we can't. They won't do it, right? They're not ready. Why don't we do back layouts on level 3 on floor? They're not ready. It's a similar comparison. The development is not there yet. So these are things that they actually can do at this level of their development. We can take them to a competition and they can compete, right? Maybe not the greatest thing in the world developmentally for down the road, but something that we can do right now. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue that, the old stride circle on bars is not highly developmental, but what else are you gonna do, right? We gotta do something. I'm not just gonna go front hip circle, back hip circle, like a circus rat. We have to do something, right? So it's just something that they can do. But with that said, a lot of people do struggle with their athletes starting to turn over on the board. Especially we've done all this work on feet in front, chest back. Now we have to get that same posture to start turning over where we can get upside down. We do that by using front flips, okay? And when I'm training the athletes on vault, and this really starts for us at about level 2.5, okay? Where they're going from a flat back to the sideways mat handspring, is we start incorporating these front flips into their development. And with these front flips, unlike floor, we use an arm circle, okay? Because I really want it to kind of be specific to vault. When we go to floor, we do not do an arm circle. So don't get confused. But for vault, when we're doing this stuff, I want to see the arm circle on the fronts. I feel like it really helps us to, again, connect the dots between what we're trying to do. Okay? And then just different places where we're doing it. So this is an aero board, so it's a board simulator, very good tool. And they can actually use it in competition couple levels. But again, working on that arm circle, hands back, and really focusing on trying to see if they're leaning in. I don't want a whole lot of lean on this. Okay? Then when we get to level 4, it's the heel drive front layouts. Okay, and this can be started in a pit, it can be started off of like an air track, inflatable mat, whatever you've got, but just getting these front layouts going as soon as you possibly can. Because every kid that I've ever had that can do a decent front layout in this manner, they're always decent vaulters. Okay, the kids that can't do this usually are the ones that really struggle. So it's finding the kind of the secret tool that it takes to really get kids to understand the vault itself. And once they figure this out, I really feel like, this is a little exaggerated because it's a little more archy than a compulsory handspring would be, of course, right? But if we can imagine doing this with a block, we're on the right track. And once we get on that track, it's usually much easier. Okay, and then elevated surfaces, like starting to think about where their eyes are a little bit higher as they're taking off of the vault board, where like a vault table can come into play. And then front layouts, and this is starting to get pretty challenging for them. You start to see little form breaks, but a good job of tying together the arm circle. In most cases, a pretty good posture on the board, and this usually really pays dividends with the vault itself. Seeing that arm circle? Okay, because I feel like if we did it like we do it on the floor, and they take that to the vault board, what are we gonna have? Flat faces. Yeah, they're gonna do that lean in deal, and we're gonna have some problems. What do we got? Okay, just more of that. And then just kind of showing how it kind of completes the process as far as turning over, but the same arm circle, hopefully the chest is back. And then this is more for level 3. If you're noticing, I'm having her try to fly over the line, because that's the problem in 3 most of the time, right? They put their hands too close to the front side of the block, and then they do hit the back on the back side of the block thing. So this is just a drill for that. Do this quickly. Better reach, but she kind of lost her heel drive, block. Just kind of just showing the board contact, the posture of the pre-flight. For kids that, just a little troubleshooting drill for kids that struggle with the stretch, especially in level 3. And again, probably not for your level 3s, but for level 4s and 5s that struggle with the stretch, working on that length, that's a really good drill. All right, block drills. So we basically, what we call the punch drills on tumble track are pogos, like a pogo stick. These are kind of inverted pogos. Okay, so the same philosophy applies. We're trying to go from a punch off of our feet to a punch off of our hands. And you can imagine what that looked like. Just like this, but on a tumble track. Okay, and just trying to really get the body tension really, really strong and straight. So that when we go to vault itself, we're able to do that. And then when they get good at it, they can do it by themselves. And we'll count how many they do. They have contests. One of the favorite things ever is the little inverted pogo contest. You can imagine them screaming it out. And I think the record is like 47 or something. Yeah, pretty good. Took her like 30 seconds almost. All right, other little block drills. I think we've all seen these. I honestly put some of this stuff in just to imagine. I really like to compact the area that we're doing things in, because this could obviously be done just on the way back. Put your kids on either side, or you can, if you can't do it on the way back, just set it up for a few minutes and right before you start vaulting, and if they're on both sides, they can get 10 or 12 of these done in a minute, right? We're working, we're moving, we're getting things done. Lots of repetitions. Gymnastics is a sport of repetitions. Okay? Just using boards in different stations. But I find that one of the best ways to keep kids engaged is variety. It's having things that are a little bit different, not the same thing every single day. That creates monotony, and when it's monotonous, it's boring, and when it's boring, they're not quite as engaged. Okay.
before with the handstand pops on the sting mat. Was there a reason for using sting mat?
Just for lots of reps, just for wrist protection. Just making sure we're not overusing and creating that pain. I don't love our kids in this level using those tiger paws. But with that said, the second we start doing your chancos, I require it. But I don't want it on too soon because I feel like this is a good time to build those joints and get a little stronger. But the girl in the red and the blue, that's really kind of what we're looking for here. Block, stop, and float. We'll kind of get into that a little bit more as we go. Little conditioning exercises on the way back. Just working on that body tension. And when we talk about block with this level, and agree with me or not, I don't care either way, to be honest, we don't talk a lot about like the shoulder shrug thing at this level. Where in upper level coaches, you'll talk about, if you can feel like your shoulder is shrugging when you contact the table, that's going to create more explosiveness and all this stuff. If you say that to your level 3s, you're just going to scratch their head. Okay? So what we just try to do is just get the straightest, longest line possible. Okay? If they're super straight, if their shoulders are way open, okay, when they hit their hands on the table, they're going to go. Okay? Because it's tight. And I talked a lot about like a super ball. Everyone knows what a super ball is? Those little rubber balls that you drop and they bounce. Why do they do that? Because they're super dense rubber. Okay, if I drop a super ball from right here, it's going to bounce because it's dense, it's tight. It's all those things that we're looking for in our position. If I take a piece of chewed up bubble gum, it's loose, it's not dense, and I drop it, what's going to happen? And I tell the kid, don't be bubble gum, be a super ball. That's the kind of thing that they can relate to and understand. Step, drop, and block it. Or step, block, and drop it, I should say. It's an old rap song or anything. But just very good for recognition of body tension. Okay, really good open shoulders as they hit, head position in. And if your kids are loose, they will look a lot worse than they do when they land. Okay, you'll get to see a little bit of a fish fry. All right, moving on. Block and hop, one of my favorites. And this also is not only good for blocking, it's good for teaching of angle repulsion, meaning that the angle that we leave the table. Because in handspring vaulting, we all know that the angle that they leave the table is very important. This also begins the stages of letting them understand what it means to stop their toes and to float. Because ultimately, in a really good 9-7, 9-8 front handspring in the compulsories, we see run fast, good board contact, super straight line, getting in before vertical, and leaving before vertical, then stopping the heel drive in a straight body line, taking as long as it possibly can to land on their feet. Right? Very hard to achieve though. They want to drive their heels over the top. They want to do all these things to continue that heel drive, but that heel drive leads to low scores in many cases. So it's really important to get them to understand what it means to stop the feet, and this is my favorite drill. A little different, more advanced version. And actually using the vault table. Really good way to observe the lines. Any judges? It's kind of a really good way to study it. She's, of course, extremely good at this for her age. See the red line in front of the body? And then we see the vault happen off before the vertical line. Okay, and that little hop up is going to be one of the really good drills in creating that kind of block and stop is what we talk about. And just using other little tools that you have, if you have them laying around, just different ways to drill this stuff. That's for level 3s, and a lot of times you don't think of it as do flat backs with your 3s. Right? That's a great way to work on stretching the pre-flight, getting the hands to the middle of the mat or even further so they don't hit their backs on the way down. A lot of times we know we do flat back in 2, and then we all almost forget it's a thing. Work flatbacks with your threes, and I guarantee you it'll help them be better vaulters. We still do flatbacks with our 4s and 5s, and all the way up to our level 10s, we do stack vaulting. That's basically what this is, stack vaulting. So we use it all the time with our threes. That's the same thing. Yep, just working on, just showing you that the way we set it up. And a really nice one, if you can set it up, is just handspring vaulting over the sideways mat using the tumble track. That's the kind of thing we'll have fun with. We'll put 8 of them up there, and we'll see how many can we do in 5 minutes. As fast as you can go. Go, move, because you don't have to set anything. It's super nice, so you can get lots of reps in, working on block angle. She's a little late, obviously, on that. But a really good way to get lots and lots of numbers in. Okay, so post-flight, this is kind of what I was trying to explain. This really summarizes it. We're really close to being done, guys. The post-flight is the idea that the athlete must rotate from the board to the hands, and then post-block phase, stop her toes, decreasing rotation, and float, creating distance from the table. Right? Very difficult to achieve. But that's usually the difference between a 9-0, 9-1 handspring, right? And the ones that you go, oh my God, that was beautiful. Where it blocks and it floats, and it spends time in the air. Those are the ones that get the big scores. Some of the drills that we do to try to stop the toes. Here we go. Okay, and it sounds so simple, but it's very difficult to do with athletes at this level, is to teach them how to maintain a body position, but to learn how to relax. Okay? We all know what is a tap. It's a tense body position, followed by a relaxed arch position, bend the bar down, followed by a tense hollow or pike position in the front. They have to learn how to relax. The best way that I've figured out how to explain it to our athletes, and everyone's going to have to be participating in this little embarrassing moment, is I want you to hold your hand up straight. Come on, Michelle. I'm going to do it with you. And we're going to shake our tight hands, as tight as you can make it. Shake it back and forth as hard as you can. Don't change the shape of your hand and slow down. What did you do? You relaxed, right? But we didn't go. Right? We were able to still maintain the position, but just slow down. That's what this is. It's maintaining the position, but being able to kind of relax. I tell them, lay back, relax, let it float up there. Keep your toes up as long as you possibly can, right? The longer the toes stay up, the longer you'll be able to do it. And some of the best vaulters that we've ever had in the compulsory levels are the kids that are willing to almost let their toes stay up so long that they'll kind of peg them into the ground every once in a while at a 45-degree angle and then fall to their butt. That's how long they let their feet go out. And we talk about it a lot too, is when you get handspring vaulters, and what's the most common landing mistake? A step forward, right? They want to go. I tell them to try to land where they just stepped. And they think about that for a second, and they say, because if we stay in the air just a little bit longer, instead of stepping there, we'll actually be able to land there. And when you can land there, that's when you're going to get the big score, right? So that's just the kind of thought process behind it. A couple of the other drills, and some of these are really bad, and some of them are starting to really look pretty good. Like she was just starting to figure it out, and then that's really good, right? She's able to block and then just kind of float. You'll see probably the gymnast in the front has her head back a little bit too much, which maybe creates a little more arch. The girl that went second had a little more head tilt, almost creating a slight tiny hollow to stop the toes, which I gravitate towards. Straight is great, but it's hard, right? So I'll gravitate on a vault towards a slight hollow before I'll gravitate towards a slight arch with the compulsion if we're trying to score. Okay, and then just using a little thingy. I'm sure the company doesn't call it a thingy, that's what I call it. But a really good way to get them aggressive on their block. Watch how much he's rising. That's pretty great. And we can get that to happen in the front handspring. That'd be wonderful. Okay, then using the level 3 system, slow, trying to get them to really feel like they're going slow after the walk. Slow. Okay? And the pit is the perfect place to do this, because you can really have fun with it. They'll almost exaggerate it to the point where, again, they'll either land 45 degrees like she's doing, like she's way back here. But I want them to feel like they're stretching back to the walk. That's how slow you're trying to go in the air. Okay? And then last thing is just using the little T-trainer, I think is what they